Static, or class methods, are self-contained, straightforward to reason about, and easy to move between classes. Instance methods, on the other hand, enable an object-oriented design with encapsulation and polymorphism. Which of these kinds of methods you choose will depend on what you're trying to do. But it can be very useful to know how to refactor safely from one to the other as the demands on the design of your system evolve. In this guided learning hour, we'll be talking about how to do just that, safe steps to move from static to instance methods. And we'll get you and your team talking about when this is a good idea. This video is a guided learning hour designed to be done together with your team. If you haven't seen one of these before, I recommend you watch right to the end because the last part is a session briefing and I explain more about it. In a moment, I'll start the part of this video you're going to show your team. So when you're ready, go to the chapter marked Gather Your Team. Hi, I'm Emily Bache. I created Saman Coaching. Welcome to my guided learning hour. Let's all go to the shared online activity board where I've prepared the session. On the screen here, you can see the code for the Yatzy 1 class from the Yatzy refactoring Kata. And I've folded up the code to just show the method signatures. So in a minute, you're going to split into groups and read this code. And I've got a couple of things for you to do while you're reading it. One is to look at these methods and spot which one of these are instance methods, in which case you can put this label next to them, and which one of them would be able to be the same if there was more than 5 dice. And again, you can duplicate this label next to any of the methods you think could stay the same with more than 5 dice. When you've labelled the methods, I'd like you to discuss, okay, there's wild inconsistency here. These signatures are all kind of different, and many of them could be standardised. And if you were going to standardise on one approach, which of these would be the closest to what you want? So talk about that too. The important thing is that you've had a good discussion and not necessarily that you've got exactly the same labels on methods as I've got here. But I think I've spotted 4 instance methods and 4 methods that would be able to be the same if we had more than 5 dice. So I'm maybe showing my preferences here, but I think this is actually a good way to have a method signature here. And I would like to do some refactoring and standardise so that all these methods have the same signature, and that would be the one I would standardise on. So there are different choices. You could have chosen to standardise on a static method like this one, where you have the class and you just pass all the arguments to the static method, and you're done with it. I think I prefer this one because I generally prefer to have an instance. Instance methods are a bit more flexible. I can use more object-oriented techniques with them. And I think I prefer to pass all the dice to the constructor so that they'd be available for any of the different calculation methods. But this is also an option to do it like this, where you don't pass anything to the constructor and each instance method gets all the arguments. So I don't know what your group decided you preferred, but I think I prefer the one that's an instance method with the arguments to the constructor. So we're going to do that refactoring now. We're going to try and improve this code and take all of the places where we've got a static method and change it into an instance method. So the method signature turns from having static in it to not having static in it. And the places where we call the code, we have to construct a Yatzy instance with all the right arguments and then call chance on it. So that's the refactoring we're going to practice today. I wanted to talk a little bit about practicing though. So I watched this talk recently by J.B. Rainsberger, Unlocking the Awesome Power of Refactoring. And I think it's a good talk. I've put a link to it in the show notes. But this is a screenshot from that talk, and he talks about the importance of practice to get better at refactoring. That as you repeat the same refactoring, it becomes easier, and you get this effect that he calls chunking. I'm not sure he's using that term completely correctly, but there's definitely an effect where you perform the same steps in the same sequence every single time, and that starts to become much easier because it goes into your long-term memory. So I found this other article quite useful for describing this. This is an article by Scott Young. And he talks about how how cognitive load theory can help you when you're learning stuff. And he has this example of this Rubik's Cube. And I don't know, but I think that refactoring is a bit like solving a Rubik's Cube. I don't know if you've seen an expert solving a Rubik's Cube. It goes so fast. And the reason they can do it so quickly is because they've kind of memorized all of the patterns, all the moves that they need to make. And they're in their long-term memory. So it's seemingly effortless for them to produce the moves in the right order, in the right way to solve the Rubik's Cube. Whereas a novice like me, you're just kind of trying stuff randomly and it doesn't really work. So what we can learn about this for how to learn is as a novice, being shown how to do it beats trial and error. That's how you get better at solving a Rubik's Cube. You get shown how to do it. And then the next part, of course, is that you practice. And practice physically using the Rubik's Cube and doing it helps more than studying what is the sequence of moves. And this is what we're going to try and do for refactoring then. We're going to I'm going to show you the moves for this particular refactoring, and then I want you to practice it until it starts to become more fluent, more easy, and those patterns start to get into your long-term memory. In this demo, I'm going to work on the Yatzy refactoring kata. I'm using Rider and ReSharper to refactor C#. And that may not be the same language and tooling that you're used to. Some of the refactoring steps that I'm going to do may be a little different in your environment. But try to focus on the main steps that I'm going through and how I keep looking for ways that the tool can help me to do things more safely. You're going to be doing the same refactoring in a minute too. Before you start refactoring, it's a good idea to check your tests. So here is the test cases for Yatzy 1, where we're calling this chance function. And there we go, they're all passing and they work pretty quickly, so we're going to be able to rely on those while we're refactoring. I do recommend actually you work out what is the keyboard shortcut for running those. You're going to be running them quite often. So let's go to this chance method. Now we would like to refactor this so that instead of being a static method, it's an instance method. And I'm looking on the refactor this menu and it's not giving me that as an option straight off the bat. And that's not so surprising. It can't do this unless one of the arguments to the function is an instance of the class. So that's actually the first move of this refactoring. It's to go in and create an instance that we're going to be able to move it to. So I'm constructing a Yatzy 1 and passing it the relevant arguments. And you'll notice I haven't invested any time or effort in naming this instance anything useful. Y is a terrible name for a variable, but it's not going to live very long. So I think I would prefer to have something short and easy to type. Okay, so the test should still be working. Now, this constructor is initializing this data member dice. It's a protected data member, and it's containing all of the dice values that I passed the constructor. So I would like actually to update my method to use this rather than the arguments that are passed in. So going back to the chance method here all the places where I'm actually using the arguments that are passed in, I want to use the data member from my new instance instead. It should be exactly the same values. I just passed them to the constructor. So I'm going to have a few multiple carets here so that I can update them all at once and use to refer to the dice array instead. Just a little bit of editing trickery there, making it a little bit faster to type. But that should do exactly the same, and the tests are still passing. So this was the first two moves. Next, I want to get that Yatzy instance into my argument list. And I can do that using the introduce parameter refactoring. And again, it doesn't matter what name it's not going to live very long. But that refactoring can be done by my tool automatically. Now, if I go to the usages here, I can see it looks a bit strange. It's just directly put that piece of code to construct the new Yatzy as the additional argument at the end there. So this looks strange. But from here, it's actually a very short move to changing this into an instance method instead. So if I do that refactoring menu again here, I've got make method non-static. And it asks, well, which instance? Yes, it's that one. And then it looks much better. Look here, now I've got the constructor being called and then the chance method called on the instance. So this is actually an instance method now. It just looks a bit strange now with all those arguments. I've got the same arguments being passed to the constructor and the chance method. So we need to fix that. So it realizes there's a problem. They've all been grayed out here in the method signature. They're not being used anywhere, all of those arguments. So I'm now going to use the change signature refactoring just to remove all of those arguments. So that went quite quickly and they're all gone. And the tests should still be passing. Yep. Great. So I think we're pretty much done. That's the new method signature that I wanted. Are you enjoying the session? Please remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel and like this video. If you haven't already got a copy of my activity board, go to Patreon. You can get a copy. So at this point, you've completed the refactoring, and you could practice doing that again, or you could practice it on the next method. So the next test here is for the ones method, which again has that same signature. It's a static method, takes all those arguments. And so you can practice the refactoring again on the ones method, and then the twos method, and then whatever. So the ones method looks pretty similar to the chance method, if we're honest. And these probably aren't the best implementations, but rather than getting distracted by doing a different refactoring now and fixing these implementations, I want you to focus on just practicing this change static to instance method refactoring that I've just showed you the moves for. So one thing you can also do, if you want to do it again on chance, you can just roll back the code and do it again. Practice exactly the same moves on the chance method. Now, some of you might be using a different programming language or different tools and might not have all of the refactorings available that I just showed you. So I wanted to do this again with a slightly different sequence of moves. There's lots of ways to do this, but I showed you there with using introduce parameter. I'm going to show it again now with fewer refactorings. So the first move is the same. You introduce a instance variable that we're going to move this method onto. And then I update all the usages of the arguments to instead use the data member that I've now got on this instance. So those were the first same two moves that I showed you from before. The next move is different though. Instead of doing introduce parameter, we extract this part as a method. And when we do extract method on this part, it gets the right signature with the instance member as an argument. And I'm calling this chance2 just to make sure I can distinguish these two. So this is still a static method, but it's only being called from one place. So here I've got the option to make method non-static here on my refactoring menu, and I will use it. But some tools don't have that, but converting this method to an instance method is trivial. When I use this, all it does is it just changed this one place here, y.chance2 instead of chance2 called on y. So that is an easy refactoring to make even without the tools. And extract method is one your tool is more likely to have than introduce parameter. And you get to the same place. So now, if we look at this method, we can inline it. And that will remove all the places that was being called and replace them with calls to our new method, which has the right signature. So here in the test, you can see that it didn't do it quite as cleanly as before. We've got this new local variable y, which I'm just going to inline as well. So inlining both of those. And then this I can rename. So this sequence of moves achieves exactly the same result, but instead of using introduce parameter, you use extract method, inline method, and rename. And you can do the make method non-static by hand if you need to. Now it's your turn. In a moment, you're going to split into smaller groups and practice doing some refactoring. I've got on this slide here the steps of the two alternate ways to do this refactoring, and I would like you to practice each one, or the one that you prefer, multiple times so that those moves start to become fluent. Just at the end of the session now, I think it's good to reflect on what you can do to make refactoring in small steps like this into a habit. Something that you do just generally while you're coding. What could you do to make that more likely to happen? Discuss in your small groups or all together if you prefer, and write some notes on this frame if you like. We've come to the end of the session today, but I find converting static methods to instance methods and vice versa are some of the common refactorings that I do. Your experience may be different, but try to look out for opportunities today to refactor your code safely in small steps using your tools. Perhaps you'll find something we practiced today useful. Happy coding! This part of the video is a session briefing, intended for the developer or coach who's going to host this guided learning hour. If you haven't done one of these before, I have another video, Guided Learning Hour How To, with more information. You'll also need some supporting materials, code samples, activity board. The code's on GitHub and the board is on Patreon. If you like this content, please do remember to subscribe to my channel and like the video. In this guided learning hour, there are several points where you need to pause the video and lead an activity with your team. One of those is the coding exercise. Some people have given me the feedback that they think they need a little longer for that part, maybe an extra 20 to 30 minutes. So that's fine, just make sure your team has agreed to spending that extra time first. On the screen here, it shows how long I think each activity could take, usually. Try and stick to this if you've only got an hour. There are 3 parts to today's session that you're going to facilitate: the connect, the concrete practice, and the conclusions. The first connect exercise is a code review that you'll do in small groups. So you're going to want to put people into breakout rooms and set some kind of time limit, maybe a timer on the mirror board. And what they're going to do then is go into these rooms, and there's a board for each group, and they're going to move those labels around to show that they've read the code and understood which ones are the instance methods. So you can sit on the main board and just watch zoomed out. And if you can see that one of the group's labels are just not moving, that could be a sign they didn't understand what they're supposed to do. And you could go into their breakout room and explain to them and check that they're all right. So that's one thing you can do as a facilitator. Just watch the whole board zoomed out and check that everyone's kind of doing stuff. The next part that you'll facilitate is, of course, the refactoring exercise. So it can be a very good idea to get people to make sure they've installed their refactoring tools before the session, so they're not doing that in the session. Because during the session, you want them to be doing refactoring and practicing their skills. They're going to be working in pairs, and it can be a good idea to make sure that both halves of the pair get some time at the keyboard. You're practicing fluency here with tools, and it works better to get that fluency if you've actually got your hands on the keyboard and you're doing it yourself, rather than just observing someone else. It's a practical skill, this refactoring. The other thing to note is that this is quite a large refactoring kata. You're not expected to finish all of it in the time you've got here. Yatzy 1 has got loads wrong with it that needs fixing. Try and get people to focus on the one refactoring moves that I've just demoed, the converting those static methods to instance methods with that sequence of moves, and get them to do that repeatedly. That's what we're trying to practice here, not making this code perfect. In the conclusions, if you're quite a small group, you might want to stay all together in the same room, but you can split up into the same pairs as before. This is a kind of a team-building activity. It's where you take stock of what you've done in the session and try and decide, well, what are we going to do about this? What is our opinions on this? What does our team think? And one of the questions I'm really hoping that people will consider here is practicing with coding tools part of your job? Can you do this kind of practice on work time? Because I think you can, but that might be controversial, so you should probably discuss it in your team. So, this is a learning out about converting from class methods to instance methods. Before you start doing a lot of that kind of thing in your code base, it could be a good idea to get your whole team to understand what you're up to and why. And I can assure you, this session is much more fun to do in a group than just watching this video by yourself. I do recommend you try it with your team. And if you do, leave me a comment either here or on social media. Tell me how it goes.